Hall of Records, Great Sphinx of Giza, Atlantis and proof of advanced ancient alien civilizations. The Hall of Records is a mythical ancient library rumored to be deposited at the time of King Imhotep at Giza in Egypt. One suggestion has been that it is under one of the paws of the Great Sphinx of Giza, which is in the Giza Pyramid complex. For something that sounds so dull and pedestrian, like a place you'd go wait in line for a copy of your birth certificate, the Hall of Records, if it exists, would be an absolutely revolutionary find. While the Library of Alexandria contained almost the entirety of ancient Greek knowledge, including works of fiction, criticism, drama, mathematics, physics, and more, before being accidentally burned to the ground, the Hall of Records is said to have served much the same purpose for ancient Egyptian knowledge. If the Hall of Records existed, if someone were to stumble across it, it would be one of the most significant finds in all of human history, as it would not only replicate many of the lost Library of Alexandria works, but also shed light on Egyptian history and thought as well. For die-hard believers in the Hall of Records, that means details on where the Egyptian people came from, or perhaps, where they really came from, which of course leads us to two of the most resilient conspiracy theory: aliens, and Atlantis. For those who are into the idea of ancient aliens, otherworldly beings who visited Earth to assist, and be worshipped by ancient peoples, the Hall of Records could hold just the confirmation they're looking for. The same goes for the lost continent of Atlantis, and folks who think that perhaps its inhabitants ended up hanging by the Nile. While most respected archaeologists and academics write the Hall of Records off as pseudo-archaeological nonsense, believers typically write that off with a, well, of course they would say that. Throwing fuel on the speculative fire is the fact that the Egyptian government has purportedly blocked investigations around what is said to be the site of the Hall of Records, the Great Sphinx of Giza. That's right, the coolest part about the Hall of Records is that it's said to be hidden beneath that most iconic, giant Egyptian statue. Any sphinx carries with it the aura of mysticism and magic, but that aura becomes magnified with a statue this size, one that also contains small, mysterious holes in its body. Archaeologists have suggested that they were involved in the creation of the statue, but again, they would say that, like most conspiracy theories, there's a metric ton of speculation around the Hall of Records, and even more crazy theories surrounding it. One of the most interesting theories, which gets bonus points for its specificity, is that the Hall of Records was sealed up by a pre-Egyptian society way back in 10,500 BC, because that's the last time that the Leo constellation lined up with the area between the Sphinx's paws. Why would that be the case, and how would people know such a thing? Outside of conspiracy theories, myths and out-and-out speculation, there's not really any evidence to support the idea of a massive, hidden Hall of Records. There aren't even any extant literary sources that mention it, and you can find ancient texts talking about all kinds of crazy things, from sea monsters to the aforementioned Atlantis, and more. But there does exist one more piece of important evidence that Hall of Records believers tend to point to. Robert M. Schoch is a professor at Boston University. He's not just some internet crackpot. And he is best known for putting forth a rather fascinating theory. Due to research on how they have weathered and aged, he contends that many ancient structures are actually the products of much older civilizations than originally thought, ones that even shared some type of contact with one another. And among those structures, the pyramids of Egypt and Mesoamerica and, of course, the giant Sphinx of Giza. As part of the research into his claims, Schoch and others used ground-penetrating radar around the Sphinx, and claim to have found a number of open spaces there. While this is far from evidence that the Hall of Records actually exists, it does indicate that the Hall of Records doesn't necessarily not exist, which is more than enough to keep the conspiracy enthusiasts postulating. The forbidden claims of Dr. Virginia Steen-McIntyre. In 1966, Dr. Virginia Steen-McIntyre would claim to have found evidence of civilizations long before previously thought. While working at a site in Hueyatlaco in Mexico, Dr. Steen-McIntyre came across advanced and sophisticated stone tools. Estimates would suggest the site be around 20,000 years old. Dr. Steen-McIntyre's results, following 4 separate testing methods, would state it to be more in line with 250,000 years old. All testing methods utilized by Dr. Steen-McIntyre were accepted by the mainstream. Perhaps strange then that almost entirely, her peers shunned, and even attacked her findings. Some even questioned her character in general. In the space of one well-researched claim, she went from a respected archaeologist to somebody to keep your professional distance from. If there were civilizations on Earth millions of years ago, even 250,000 years ago as per Dr. Steen-McIntyre's results, then might they have advanced somewhat over the thousands and thousands of years that followed? We have written before of the flood, and if it might have actually happened, and more importantly, what type of world existed prior to the event. If civilizations did stretch this far back, might the legends of such lost worlds as Atlantis be true, for example? Edgar Cayce, and Claims of Atlantis. The first mention of Atlantis in recorded history is through the teachings of the Greek philosopher, Plato. Although mainstream history suggests the claims to be fiction, others believe them to be fact hidden as myth. More recently, in the early 1930s, mystic Edgar Cayce made several remarkable speeches concerning the lost world. What's more, he would state that survivors of Atlantis had connections to the ancient Egyptian societies. Many firmly believe in Cayce's abilities as a prophet, and he has been right on many occasions. He would enter a trance, and from this state, he could access knowledge, both from the past and the future. Cayce, in one of these trances, would reveal much detail about life in Atlantis. They were an extremely advanced society, both culturally and technologically. They made use of electrical devices that cut through all known metals and rocks. They also utilized sound wave technology for communication. Even more intriguing, they would travel on vertical and horizontal elevators of connecting tubes powered by compressed air and steam. They also used elephant hides to construct airships that would travel both through air and water. Perhaps most notably, particularly given the advancements in understanding crystal technology today, are the notions that the Atlanteans utilized such power in combination with the forces of nature to serve their society. So far advanced as they apparently were then, what went wrong? Secrets of the Sphinx? Many have tried without success to gain access to the apparent space under the paw of the Sphinx. In 1997, Joe Jehoda and Dr. Joseph Scher appeared to validate Cayce's claims of an empty space exactly where he said it would be. Their initial examinations would indicate to them that the space was flawless in terms of the precise 90-degree angles at the corners. Remember, Cayce claimed the Atlanteans had technology that could cut metal and rock. Might this have been responsible for these precise angles? Their application to excavate under the paw would fall on deaf ears. So too, the application of 2 French archaeologists who had similar claims, including tunnels that ran from the Great Pyramid of Giza to the paw itself. Maybe the Hall of Records, should it exist, might also tell of the flood in detail. Recent theories have suggested the Sphinx is much older than mainstream history states it is. Geologist Robert Schlock argues that water corrosion around the Sphinx could only have come about through prolonged rainfall. The last time Egypt experienced the type of rainfall Schlock is talking about is roughly 10,000 BC. This would make them approximately 12,000 years old. Incidentally, around the time many believe the flood occurred, It might also, if it is ever proven to be true, the fall of Atlantis,